On today's episode of Spotlight ETSU, I talk with Department of Public Safety Chief Jack Cottrell about his background and safety goals on campus. Also as a guest is Rusty Sheridan, who discusses the road which brought him to ETSU as well as his career on such films Shallow Hal and Talladega Nights. Stick around, we're turning on the Spotlight. Today we're talking to Rusty Sheridan. Thanks for joining us, Rusty. How are you today?
Good, thanks for having me.
All right, first off, can I call you Rusty or do you prefer to go by anything else?
Typically in classroom I prefer to go by Professor Sheridan, but this seems to be somewhat of an informal conversation, so Rusty's fine.
Okay, all right. So let's go ahead and start off on you then. Where are you from?
I'm from, was born overseas, was a military brat, but I grew up in Charlotte, North Carolina.
Okay, so what's your background? Is it Charlotte, North Carolina, or did you move around a lot?
Yeah, well, we did move around a lot, but my father retired from the military when I was 5, so we moved a ton of times until then, and then we settled in Charlotte.
Okay, so what's your background then in education?
Well, I worked at a number of schools in Charlotte, did my undergrad there, and then stayed in North Carolina for my graduate degree and studied film there, and then I started teaching at the program where I got my undergrad. Actually, my old film professor from when I was an undergrad asked me if I would teach some classes. This was back in 2008. So I started teaching just adjunct part-time and kind of fell in love with it, and then started pursuing that even more than the filmmaking that I was pursuing.
So where did you go to school then? Where did you get your film education?
At UNC Greensboro.
Greensboro, okay. So what inspired you to go into film then?
Well, it was that undergraduate class that I took actually when I was at UNC Charlotte. I was not a film major. I didn't study film until I went to grad school. I didn't really know very much about film at all until I was done with my undergraduate studies. But I took an elective course. I was a philosophy major, and I took a class called, what was the name of the class? Film and Identity was the name of the class. And it had a lot of films that had spiritual and philosophical themes, and we talked about it from a religious studies and philosophical perspective in that class, and I saw an Ingmar Bergman film that I'd never heard of this guy before, you know, and it kind of blew my mind, and I got more and more interested in studying film. Started watching a lot of European film. Took a German film class. There wasn't, like I said, there wasn't a major or anything in film, but there were electives that you could take in criticism and things like that. So I started taking a lot of those classes and got really, really interested in it, and decided that was something I wanted to pursue, and that was when I went to grad school to study it.
Okay, so that kind of shifted like your whole life momentum, basically.
Yeah.
What was your plan to do before that?
I don't know. I don't know if I had one. I initially was a music major. I'm a drummer. I played in bands and stuff. Never really saw that as a career. But then, yeah, switched to philosophy, which, what are you going to be, a philosopher when you graduate, right? Like, you know, what's the job market there? So I wasn't really thinking about work or careers or anything at that point. I just wanted to learn. You know, I went to school. I went to the university to be educated. You know, I wasn't thinking about what was I going to do 5, 10, 20 years down the road. I wasn't interested in a career at that point. I was just trying to be a more enlightened person. So,
It's a pretty good goal to have, I think. So, what kind of films have you worked on then over the course of your career?
Well, I've freelanced on a number of projects, other people's films and some Hollywood films, a lot of commercials, hundreds and hundreds of commercials, probably close to 1,000 commercials.
Wow.
If I ever had to add them all up. But so that was a majority of the work that I did on the freelance side, and I worked in a number of departments. I worked as a grip, an assistant director, camera assistant, a lot of work as a PA, just kind of, you know, getting people water and taking out the trash and stuff like that. So freelancing, worked on a number of different projects, but then for my own productions, I worked primarily as a writer-director. I do shoot a little bit. Primarily, I'll shoot if the budget doesn't allow for me to hire another director of photography, because my passion is really in writing and directing. So I've written and directed a number of commercials and a handful of short films, and I'm in pre-production right now on my first feature.
Oh, can you tell us anything about that?
Sure, yeah. I'll be filming I got a grant from the university, actually, I'm very thankful for, to shoot a short version of the film. The film is called Madam, I'm Adam, and it's a feature-length film about a high school dropout who skips town because he doesn't want to take over his mother's house cleaning company, which is the only future that he has for him after he graduates. So he skips town and kind of hitchhikes around the country on a journey of self-discovery in search of meaning for his life. So I'm making a short version of that, and I have not written the short script yet. I'm actually right now in the process of culling down.
It's a very, very early process.
Yeah, some of the, I'm looking at some of the scenes from the feature, which I think are the strongest, and then kind of adapting them into a short version, because I'll be shooting that next April.
Okay, so what's the idea here then? You make a short film and try to get that through some festivals to generate funding for the longer film?
Exactly. Yeah, you nailed it. Yeah, Whiplash is probably the last film that was a good example of that. It was a short film, low budget, and they made the film. It did very well at festivals, and they managed to, on the strength of the short film, they managed to get financing for a feature version.
So when you do it, in the ideal situation where you do get financing for a feature film, do you refilm everything, new actors, new whatnot, or is it sort of an adaptation to what you don't have yet?
Right. Now, I would definitely refilm and shoot it all, even if I'm using the same script or the same scenes. You know, I would refilm it all for the feature just to maintain continuity for the longer project. I don't know that I would recast, and you saw that in Whiplash as well. The lead actor, or I forgot his name now, the guy in the M&M's commercial, the State Farm commercial, or Farmers Insurance commercial, won the Oscar. Can't remember his name right now. Anyway, it was the same actor in both the short and the feature. Okay. There are other examples of feature films that started as shorts, and a lot of times they will recast them. But I don't know. I haven't even written the script yet, so I'll cast it after the script is done. Right.
So then you talked about having a bunch of different roles on your previous projects, like Grip. For people who are watching that don't know what that is, what does that entail? You know, what did your different roles on these sets entail? As an assistant director, I think you said, a Grip, and various things like that. What does that mean?
Yeah, well, I was very fortunate in the film school that I went to, in that, and it's the same approach that we use here at ETSU, in that it's a very broad set of classes and experiences that you get in the classroom, so that you're able to do lots of things. You know, a lot of film schools you just study directing or cinematography or writing. You know, and here at ETSU, as you know, you take classes in writing and shooting and directing and editing.
Right.
So I had, and just by my nature, I'm a very kind of rounded type of person. I have a lot of interests and experiences and backgrounds in a lot of different things, even outside of film. So I just kind of took naturally to whatever challenge and whatever job there was that was open. I was able to do it. So I was able to work in the grip and electric department, you know, setting up C-stands and schlepping sandbags and setting up dolly and that kind of thing. And then in camera world as an assistant camera, operating the slate, changing lenses, even loaded some film on Shallow Hal. Actually, it was the only time I did that. And assistant directing, you know, kind of managing the set and keeping things going, cracking the whip, making sure all the extras and background are where they need to be, so the director doesn't have to worry about it. So yeah, I'm very fortunate in that I was able to work in a lot of different departments, and I think it made me a better, more well-rounded filmmaker and educator as well because of that.
So you mentioned you worked on Shallow Hal. Then what was that like?
It was cool. It was the first feature film that I worked on. I'd worked on like a CBS made-for-TV movie before that, but only for one day. So Shallow Hal was the first. It was the first Hollywood film, you know. And I was an undergrad. Like I said, I wasn't studying film. I didn't know very much about it, and I just kind of talked my way into getting this job on the film. Just through my personality and just, you know, I really wanted to, you know, I knew I wanted to learn more about film, so I approached the production manager and the director and asked, you know, if I could get a job on that film, and I was interested in starting at the bottom and working hard. So anyway, so I did, and they brought me on as an intern and then worked in the camera department, which is, of course, one of the more technical areas and departments, and I knew nothing about film, but one of the assistant camera persons, they took me under their wing and showed me the ropes and showed me all. If I wasn't working, they were teaching me. So it was great. They were always kind of mentoring me and tutoring me and helping me to learn. So I learned a ton. I worked on that show for about 30 days, and by the end of it, I was ready to go and shoot something. You know, just that experience of just being immersed in it. Right.
So you said that you just kind of hit up the director, basically, and try to convince him to give you a job. How did you do that? Like, I mean, was there a process where they came out and said, hey, we need an intern, you applied for it? Or did you literally just find their email, phone number one day and just, you know, call them up, hey, I'm Rusty, you know?
No, I mean, you know, it was a big film, and it was, you know, so it's whenever there's a big film shooting in a town outside of Los Angeles or New York,
Right,
you know,
sure.
it's news in the city, you know, so
Right.
everybody knew that this film was being shot, and people were, you know, talking about it, and oh, I saw Gwyneth Paltrow at the pizza place, and they're shooting this scene outside of the library downtown, blah, blah, blah. So I knew where they were filming, and it was outside downtown, Trade and Tryon Street, downtown Charlotte, right in the heart of downtown, and I just walked up to the director. They were filming outside, and I knew what he looked like. I looked him up on IMDb, so I just walked up to him and you know, extended my hand, said, "Hi, my name's Rusty. I'd like to study film, and do you have any positions on your movie?"
It's kind of an old school way to get a job, I guess.
Yeah.
So then I'd like to ask you, you mentioned a moment ago, you know, one of your jobs was like, you know, changing film and things like that. And nowadays, most films don't actually use film. So have you seen that happen with a lot of other jobs or roles where they've kind of disappeared to the change of technology? I mean, we're not talking about a span of 30 years, but I mean, even within the last 10 years, things have radically changed, it seems.
Right. Well, the jobs haven't disappeared. I mean, maybe some jobs at Kodak have disappeared, or, although they're not gone. They've just downsized. You know,
Right.
they're still creating film, and a lot of projects are still being shot on film, but definitely not as many as 10, 15,
Right.
20 years ago. But those people, that woman, Monica, that took me under her wing on Shallow Hal, she's still a second assistant camera, working in North Carolina.
Right.
But she works with digital cameras now instead of, but you know, so the jobs are still there. Now she's not loading film into the cameras
Right,
anymore,
sure.
but she is, you know,
Loading hard drives.
uploading hard drives to a computer and keeping notes about metadata
Right.
on you know,
So the
digital
industry,
files.
so the industry allows the people in it to change and to learn as they go and to adapt. Instead of just shoving old people out and bringing in a new generation who knows how to work with hard drives, the industry kind of allows people to learn the next thing coming and
Well, the
adapt to it.
industry requires it. You know, if you
Right,
don't,
right.
you know, I was at a master class, American Society of Cinematographers master class last month, and there were a lot of DPs there that are, you know, these are Oscar-winning DPs that I'm talking to and that I'm working with, and that have been working in the industry for decades. You know, and probably 60% of the class was talking about tech stuff. You
Right.
know, and they were talking about how, you know, it doesn't matter. Some of them said, yeah, I prefer to shoot on film, but if the budget doesn't allow it, or if the producer says no, then
It's where the job's at, it's where the job's at.
And one of the filmmakers said he was a cinematographer from Memphis, Tennessee, and he's been working out, and he shot E.T., Spielberg's E.T., and he said that yeah, I love shooting on film. He said, but I'll shoot on whatever you ask me to shoot on. If you pay me, I'll
Yeah.
shoot it. You know,
Go where the
so
job
you have
is,
to
right?
adapt, right?
Yeah. Okay, well, Rusty, I thank you for coming by. That's all the time we have for today. So I appreciate you being here and talking with us.
My pleasure.
All right.
Thank you very much, Steve.
Today we're sitting here with Chief Jack Cottrell, who is the Chief of Police here at ETSU. Chief, thanks for joining us.
You're very welcome,
Glad to
Steve.
have you on today.
Glad to be here.
So, first off, I just want to ask you about, you. Where are you from?
Well, I was born and raised in Fairmont, West Virginia. My wife and I moved to Johnson City in 1974, Stephen, after I was discharged from the Air Force. I spent 7 years there and got back in school at ETSU in 1975, went straight through and got my BS in June of 77. Started to work for the state the next day, and I've been with them ever since. Started at this department in September 1978.
Okay. Do you come from a background in police work?
No, I come from a background in education. My grandfather was a principal at my high school for 38 years. My father taught there for 30 years. So I come from a background of educators.
Okay. So how did you get into law enforcement then? Does that have to do with your time in the Air Force?
Not really, Stephen. You know, I had an associate, a friend, who was the director of a law enforcement planning agency here locally, and he sort of steered me in that direction. Got us acquainted with the criminal justice department here at ETSU, and I liked what I saw opportunities, and went after them.
Very cool. So then let me shift to the department instead, as you mentioned. How big is our department?
Stephen, I've got 20 sworn police officers, okay? We're commissioned through, just like every other police officer in this state. I have 6 full-time dispatchers, 3 part-time. I've got 1 civilian employee who's my administrative assistant, and I also have a couple of unsworn security officers.
Do they work through Axis or do they work through the department?
No, they work through me. Housing and I, and soon to be the Kingsport Center. Well, the Kingsport Center's been with us longer than any of our unsworn security staff. And the library is getting ready to put one on. Housing has one that works up at Buck Ridge.
Right.
And of course, housing funds an officer for us, who is a full-time sworn officer assigned to the housing division.
And who is that?
That'll be Officer Chris Mathis, former sheriff of Carter County.
Okay. So what's the difference then between a sworn officer and an unsworn officer?
Basically, sworn officers are armed, have powers of arrest.
Okay.
Unsworn officers do not have powers of arrest, and they are unarmed.
Okay. So is there a difference between an unsworn officer and a security member of Axis? Or is it just
Not
mostly
really.
who pays the check?
They're closely related. All of Axis's personnel are certified security. They have licenses, security guard licenses, and that's a program we're getting ready to initiate with our unsworn staff, Stephen.
Okay. So what authority do officers in the Department of Public Safety carry?
The same,
they,
the same authority as any police officer in the state.
so they're fully fledged police
Yes,
officers?
they
then?
are.
Is that-
They're not security officers. They are police officers.
So when you say any officer in the state, do you mean state troopers?
Yes, same powers of arrest. Now, jurisdiction is what keeps people where they belong, Stephen. Our jurisdiction is right here on the ETSU campus. It goes with us when we travel to and from ETSU properties.
Okay.
But as far as having jurisdiction to go over to North Johnson City and work traffic, no, we've got enough to do right here. If it was necessary for us to do an investigation in another part of the city or the county, we would work with the jurisdiction of record there, the Sheriff's Department or the Johnson City Police Department.
Okay. So what kind of qualifications then do sworn staff officers have in the department? Are they all previous city officers, or
No.
how does that work?
We have some, Stephen, that we have hired, sent to the academy and brought up graduates from here. Many of our officers, matter of fact, the majority by far, are previously employed officers from other jurisdictions. Washington County, Johnson City, Carter County, Unicoi County. We have officers who have worked all over this upper East Tennessee area. We have found it more advantageous for us to hire experienced people, and we are very particular about the people we hire, Stephen. We profile them very carefully to make sure that they fit the profiles we want for an ETSU police officer.
So what do you mean by profiling? Is that like a background check?
Oh, absolutely. We look at their character, how they interact with people, and we do a pretty in-depth assessment interview process. I won't get into all the details of that, but there's testing, there's wellness checks, there's physicals, there's psychologicals. We have to meet state standards.
City standards?
State standards,
okay.
state post-commission, Peace Officer Standards and Training Commission, which sets forth the criteria for what's required to become a commissioned officer in the state of Tennessee, Steve.
Okay. Is that a standard thing among universities? So, for example, if I go to UTK, does their campus have
Yes,
their
they
own
have
dedicated officers?
Yes, they do.
Okay.
There are some schools in the TBR system that, and these would be your technical schools, that do not have sworn police officers. Most of our community colleges, and I'll underline most, have commissioned officers working for them. Some are only have security, unarmed security, but that's something that the Board of Regents, which is not the Board of Regents as we knew it any longer, as far as four-year universities go, but they still are the Board of Regents to all our community colleges and CCAT institutions. So they're working on security and what's needed on those campuses, Stephen.
Okay. So then I want to ask about Johnson City's police department in comparison to the ETSU police department. What kind of line is drawn between those? Is there a line?
We have a jurisdictionally, yes. But Johnson City has jurisdiction on this campus.
Okay.
As does Washington County has jurisdictions on this campus, and the city of Johnson City. You've got jurisdictions within jurisdictions, Stephen. We're within Johnson City and Washington County. Johnson City's within Washington County, but that's where the line stops, at the county line as far as jurisdiction. Actually, Johnson City officers do not have free reign jurisdiction anywhere in the county. But Washington County officers, deputies, do have jurisdiction throughout the county.
So in the sense of jurisdiction then, how does that work? For example, if a off-duty ETSU police officer is in the tree streets and they see something happen, are they authorized to
It depends on why they're on the tree street, Stephen.
I'm just thinking like maybe they're out for a run because they live there or something.
They would be acting as a private citizen.
Really? Okay.
Yes. There are areas of Johnson City where we have, if they call us, say, and asking for assistance, we're going to go. We have a memorandum of understanding with them, and if they need help, we're going to go. They will come here anytime we ask for assistance in any kind of situation. But jurisdictionally, an officer who is traveling from work, say the campus here, to his home, he can intervene to a point, Stephen. If there's life and safety involved, absolutely. Most of us have phones now, so he can call the jurisdiction of record and report what he sees, or if absolutely necessary, intervene. But he would be doing so as a citizen of this state.
That's really interesting.
It gets a little complicated.
Yeah, it sounds like it can get kind of messy.
It can. It really can.
So how many officers then are on staff every night averaging? Or day even? I'm an RA, so I always think of nights.
We have 3 shifts. There's 4 officers assigned to each shift, okay? So those 4 people cover 7 days a week, 24 hours a day. Yeah. So, of course, like we have a shift right now, 7 to 3, 3 to 11, and 11 to 7. Okay. So those 12 really cover that. Now, we have another officer that works housing who works evening hours. We have a school resource officer who works university school. That position's funded by the Department of Education. We have a bike patrol officer who's dedicated on days. So we have more than just, there's an administrative staff. I have a lieutenant and 2 detectives that are there Monday through Friday, pretty much every day. And so there are additional personnel that we can draw on if we have a situation.
Okay. Well, then I want to shift gears then and ask you about issues on campus. And I'm curious, what do you think is the biggest safety issue that our campus faces?
Safety issue. Well, Stephen, that's a difficult question from several standpoints. I think we have a very safe campus. As far as issues that we're faced with today, you read the news just like I do. I'm very concerned for my officers out here on the street. Right. You've seen what happened in Iowa yesterday.
No, I haven't.
2 police officers were ambushed and killed by a deranged person. We saw what happened in Texas, where we saw in Virginia on the University of Virginia Tech campus, campus officers in a parking lot. Guy walks up and shoots him in the head. Right. These things are becoming a lot more prevalent than I wish they were. And so I'm concerned for my officer's safety. So Is that a threat to our kids? Not directly, but it is a concern because anything that affects my department affects our campus. There's a ripple effect, Stephen. So, but as far as safety of our kids here on this campus and our staff and faculty, I think we've got a very safe campus. You know, we work very hard to make it that way. You're going to run into, you know, what crimes, what have you seen as a student here that mostly in the alerts we've had a considerable number of sexual assaults.
Right.
But I hope our students on campus understand what context those come in. They're acquaintance assaults.
Right.
Or rapes. They, you know, you can, whatever terminology you want to use, it doesn't make a victim any less a victim.
Right.
But most of the time we have alcohol involved and the two people know each other. Mm-hmm. And it starts out they're together by consent. Mm-hmm. But no means no, Stephen.
Mm-hmm, of course.
And these are messages we try to get across to all of our students, you know, especially athletes. We saw what's happened at Baylor University.
Right.
Good Lord. That if you saw the news last night and saw the coverage, I couldn't believe what I was hearing.
Right.
So, but anyway, we strayed away from your question, but you know, I personally don't see the threats to our kids on this campus for the most part will come from outside this campus.
Right. Okay, well, I want to thank you for being here. Unfortunately, that's all the time we have today.
Okay, Stephen.
So I appreciate you coming down.
Anytime.